when I just started thinking about the possibility of me starting a company, because they're serial successful entrepreneurs, all of them, and investors, I would ask them, what do you think? And they would always answer and give me an advice, but they would also say, just do it, man. Just begin, right? Like,
Yeah.
don't wait for the perfect time. It's not going to happen. Don't wait for the perfect idea. It's not going to happen. Just begin. And I wish I would have listened to them 5 years earlier, right? Because that would have gave me 5 more years. And like, I would have been 5 years ahead of what I am now. If somebody's thinking about doing, or they quit and they decide, okay, cool, I'm starting this, just begin. Just begin talking to people that have done it before. Begin doing something. Begin building prototypes. Begin talking to potential customers. Begin talking to potential investors. And it doesn't matter how many no's you hear and if people are going to laugh you out of the room. It's going to happen anyway.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Ignite podcast. Today, we're delighted to have Egor Olteanu. I had to practice that a couple times on the program. He is co-founder and CEO of Volt AI, former Google X, Alphabet's special projects leader, U.S. Army veteran. We're thrilled to have him on the program. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Well, would love to get an intro from you for the audience.
Sure. I guess where do I start? I joined the Army right after high school. And after getting out, I went to school, got my bachelor's. Afterwards, I was lucky enough to be recruited by Google, specifically into Google X, which, I had the privilege of working on a couple of very cool projects, including Google Loon. Afterwards...
What was that? Google what?
Google Loon. It's like, that one of those loon birds. It's the high altitude ballooning project.
That's right. I remember that. And what was the goal of that? It was to provide internet?
I believe that was the ultimate goal. But I mean, I started when it was just 5 people and it was called Daedalus. And I think then it was called Icarus. So the strategic goals of that project changed quite a bit.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thinking about back going into the Army out of high school, what was that decision like?
Well, to me, it was a fairly simple decision. Most of the males in my family served during various times, including, World War II and some really major projects like that. So for me, it was, I guess, like some sort of a rite of passage, where, I would have to join the military. Plus, being a young kid and doing sports and working out to me was a sort of a challenge. And I really wanted to jump out of airplanes, and I really wanted to do a bunch of that cool stuff. So it was a natural transition from high school to go to the military instead of directly to college. And plus, personally, back then I knew that I had much higher chances of succeeding at college if the military taught me a little bit more discipline.
It's interesting to have that self-reflection or self-knowledge at that age to know that you needed more discipline. A lot of people don't. And I think about this a lot, compulsory military service and how good that is for young men. Obviously, going to war is not good. Like, we don't want to go out and die, but like actually having to go through a common disciplinary leadership kind of training, like going through the Army, I think is really beneficial.
Well, it was also, think about it this way, that my family and I immigrated to the U.S. when I was 14 going on 15. So at that time, I was only in the U.S. for a few years, right? When I was finishing school. And aside from the fact that, my grades in high school were not very good, to say the least.
Me neither.
which I changed.
Not until the last couple of years, yeah.
Which I changed in undergrad and definitely changed in grad. Lucky for me, and again, probably because of the military. But, being in the U.S. for only a few years and then looking at my grades, I realized that A, I do need more discipline, and B, it was also some sort of at least that's the way I justified it in my head, that would give me that extra edge, getting into a better school, getting a better job, right? Potentially, starting my own business down the line, even though I wasn't even thinking about those things when I was joining the military, but kind of subconsciously, I knew that military service would potentially give me an extra edge that I would need, to stand out from the crowd.
Yeah, I can imagine in the admin's office at any great school kind of looking at that as a badge of honor and kind of a checkbox in the yes column rather than negative. And then you got the GI Bill to pay for school, which, I mean, school now is significant. It covers everything, right? It's like tuition, board, everything, or most everything?
It covered pretty much everything. And again, I got lucky. Not everybody did, because when I joined, I don't believe that they had the post 9/11 GI Bill in place. I think they just had the regular GI Bill. And when you join, you also they ask you if you'd like to get an extra booster. I think it's like 6 or 7 grand. So you just kind of have to check that mark and pay into it. But by the time I got out, they already passed the 9/11 GI Bill, which again, the details. I mean, I know the exact details, but it's something along the lines of not only do they pay the tuition, but they also give you like a living allowance, and they give you an allowance for a computer, for your books, etc. And then they passed something called, I believe it's called the Yellow Ribbon Program. I think specifically for combat veterans or veterans that have received Purple Hearts, etc. And again, like my audience and your audience, I apologize if I'm mixing up some of the details, but you could apply for Yellow Ribbon, which I did, and it gives you that extra boost if the school costs more than what like the national limit is, which mine did. I got my bachelor's and my master's at American University, which is a private school. But yeah, I mean, that was a phenomenal program to take advantage of, because all you had to do is just show up, put in the time, put in the work, and they would cover the financial piece of it.
Amazing. So you spent 8 years at Google with many different projects you worked on. What are some key takeaways from your time there working at Google X? Kind of in its heyday, I think, too. And how that prepared you for your role as a founder?
You know, they had this, I don't know, maybe they still do. They had this like internal network called MoMA, where you go in and like you research a bunch of tools. And one of the tools was like you can see your tenure, meaning that how many people are essentially have spent more time at Google versus less time at Google. And I think by the time I left, I was like older in tenure than like 97% of the company.
Oh, wow.
So the company grew like crazy, even though I joined in 2011, which was like, 7 years after their IPO. But still, when I joined X, it was in one building. They had like one building, then they had, like a satellite garage where the self-driving cars were being worked on. And I saw that entire growth of the company was just tremendous. But the first realization of Google X specifically for me was very quick. And the realization was, wow, am I stupid? It's like, I don't know anything about anything, because, you kind of, you join a company like that and you're like, well, like I'm a pretty smart guy. I have a couple of really cool hobbies, right? I spent some time in the military. I understand a little bit about leadership. I'm a problem solver. And then you're like, yeah, but everybody's like that. And plus, on top of that, like, this guy has a PhD from MIT, right? Like,
right, yeah.
This guy has an MBA from Harvard and a music degree, and he flies helicopters on the weekends, and he builds like race cars in his garage. I'm like, how do you compete with that? Like, these people are not human. But it was such a really cool motivator, seeing what people are capable of and seeing how much they're willing to learn or how hard they're willing to work to achieve their goals. And it's like, no matter how many barriers would be in front of you, and a lot of those projects are extremely ambitious, and it's failure after failure after failure, for years, and they don't give up. They're constantly looking for solution. They're constantly, throwing stuff against the wall to see how can they make this work. And if you're prepared for that, that is an amazing school. I think a lot better than any MBA you can possibly get.
Yeah, I love that. I love that analogy. And I had a similar experience when I got to Silicon Valley, and just being, a unicorn startup I worked at had 30 PhDs on staff. And, I'm sort of just surrounded by geniuses, genius level people, and a bit in over my head. But I think, what's great about that is that you learn to swim with the current, and you get smart really fast because you're surrounded by amazing people. And if you ever look around and if you're not below average in the room, you're probably in the wrong room, right? If you're the smartest guy in the room, probably in the wrong room. Get into a different room and try to surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. That's really good advice. And
for sure.
How do you think Google's reacting now? I mean, you're doing an AI startup, obviously, with kind of the assault on search. Do you think they pull through with a large language model kind of paradigm shift? They seem to be moving as fast as they can to kind of integrate Gemini into all kinds of services. And yeah, what's your take on all that?
I'm probably one of the biggest Google fans, because just the opportunity that that company has given me to learn and to meet some great people that became friends, advisors, angel investors. So I'm always rooting for Google and for Alphabet to like go, be the best. But yeah, I mean, we all remember what happened when they released Gemini, right? And when people were comparing it to like ChatGPT, it wasn't doing that well. From what I understand, it's gotten much better now. And I look at it this way, that I saw at some points at Google when Google started losing that culture of, break things and get stuff done. Don't worry about, counting every single penny. Just work on amazing things and, get those 10x moonshots going on everything, not just Google X, but a bunch of other projects. And then there was some weird shift, I think I would say like 2016, 2017, where it felt like a lot of that was being lost. A lot of that breakthrough mentality was being lost. And then I left in 2019, obviously, so I don't know what happened since, but I'm hoping if they're not there yet, that they would, at least in certain departments, would go back to that mentality. Because that mentality and the talent that Google has and the history that it has and as much love as it has from consumers, that would make the company unstoppable. And I think if there's anything that would make Google fail, as if they try to micromanage and add bureaucracy to such levels that would essentially force failure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm kind of reminded of the old axiom of can OpenAI find distribution before Google finds innovation? And there certainly seem to be making moves. I think they just bundled Gemini into the Google Workspace. I haven't tried it yet because I'm OpenAI through and through so far, but I will give it a shot. I'll start doing some A/B tests and seeing which one comes up with better outputs. But because I integrate AI into like all my workflows. So switching gears, let's talk about the origin story behind Volt AI. What is Volt AI? And tell the audience about that story.
So Volt AI is an artificial intelligence startup in the physical security space. And before I tell you a little bit about the product, maybe I can tell you why it got started. I was lucky enough to start it with my best friend, who, we've known each other for 23 years, right? We grew up together in the same area and then kind of stayed friends through college, and then ended up being neighbors when he moved to the Bay Area to work for companies like Apple, Uber, Facebook, etc. But we would very often meet at his house, or we would just take walks and kind of brainstorm. It's like, if we were going to start a company, right, what would it be? And we must have done it for a few years. And every single idea, the ideas that he thought that were great, I would challenge him. And then we both would kind of realize, probably not that great of an idea. And then the ones that I had, same thing, he would challenge me. So nothing really moved up until we were going to have lunch, 2018, if I'm not mistaken, at the San Bruno campus. It's a YouTube building. And it was the same day when the shooting happened. So we didn't have lunch. Obviously, we didn't get there. But when the lady walked in with a pistol in her hand, and she found a way to go into where people were having lunch,
Wow.
and she opened fire, and she hurt a couple of folks. That really kind of hit home for me and for him, because you hear about all these tragedies, like
Right.
the Parkland shooting and then the Las Vegas shooting, but it's somewhere out there in the distance, right? It's a terrible thing. It should never happen, but it doesn't quite hit home when you realize it's like, yeah, you can be sitting and having lunch, and somebody can just walk into your building, and now it's one thing when you're involved, but God forbid this touches somebody you love, right?
Yeah.
And I think the process behind it was really that, because of my time in the military, and because of the job that I did in the military, I understood how some of those things could evolve, what first responders typically go through when they have to, walk into an objective that has a potential threat in it, that, to neutralize as quickly as possible. And I thought that there was a way to connect technology to existing cameras to essentially build, and I'm using the words that we used back then, right? Essentially build some sort of a, risk management brain that would continuously monitor for threats. And if those threats are identified, present that information in the most efficient way possible and easily digestible way possible to the first responders to be able to respond to it so quickly to either prevent that problem from happening, or if it cannot be prevented, stop it as quickly as possible to minimize the negative outcomes. Now, the operational piece of it, I kind of had that image in my head, but I'm not an engineer. I love tech. I love being in tech, but I'm not an engineer. My co-founder, Dimitri, is. And he's smarter than me. He's more talented than me in every single way.
Hmm.
And I knew that if this was a stupid idea, he would tell me. But he couldn't kill it. And he said, well, maybe there is a way to do it, So how would we operationalize it? Is there a way to really, instead of building a gadget, turn this into a tool? And we thought that there was a way to do it. So we kind of drew down a couple of ideas, started working on a couple of prototypes. And next thing we know, 2020 rolls along and we raise our first pre-seed round. So that's how the company gets started.
That's amazing. And so what's the integration point? Who's the customer, or what's the problem that you're solving for them?
So essentially, we don't, well, I'll start with that. We don't deploy new cameras. That is something that we did not want to do. We wanted to integrate with existing customer hardware. Most facilities they go to, from enterprises to schools, they have cameras, they're IP cameras, they sit on the network, so there's a way to integrate with them. Once we realized that we could do that, we really had to figure out, what is that problem that we really want to go after? Because if you look around in the industry, there's some great companies out there that try to bring technology to physical security, which, in my opinion, historically has been neglected when it comes to AI, automation, etc. Unlike cyber, for example. And some companies are solving the hardware problem, better cameras. Other companies are solving, bring better analytics, more way to look at the footage, at the historic footage, categorize it in such a way that you can get lessons learned and educate the user or the security teams in the future. We really wanted to build a real-time system. We really wanted to focus on understanding what is happening in your facility right now, which is what we call our fault perception system, and I call it, full situational awareness. And if you can understand what's happening in your facility, if something happens, you can not only pinpoint exactly where it's happening, and there's a way to build the system that way, which is like what we did. We essentially turned all of customer areas into live 3D models. Not only can we pinpoint exactly where the incident is taking place, but if that incident is mobile, meaning it starts moving from one area to the next, from one building to the next, from indoor to outdoor, and vice versa, we can start tracking it, along with a couple of really cool things that we do in terms of validation to get away from false positives. It essentially becomes, instead of being a system that says, hey, we noticed this, now go figure out what to do with it, it becomes a system that say, hey, this is what it's happening, it's validated, right? This is what the current state is, and this is how it's progressing through our facilities. This way, when that alert is received, the customer can immediately take action on it. So minimizing response time as much as possible.
That's amazing. So, and this is something I'm pretty familiar with because I live with a retired sergeant major of the Army. That's my father-in-law. And his last kind of encore job was running Apple's security at their campus, and making sure everybody was safe and paying attention to what's going on. So as you think about using AI in this way, part of the unlock, it seems, is you can now use AI sufficiently advanced to categorize, classify threats in real time, and so you don't rely on this, the guy, the security guard just sitting there kind of bored at the desk, like looking at all these like screens, trying to, monitor for things. You can actually bring that to the attention of the security personnel in real time.
And not just security personnel. I mean, yes, the motivator behind it was a shooting, which is a very violent, rapid moving event. But just focusing on weapons detection, in my opinion, I may be wrong, but to me, it's like, I go back to something that I heard watching Family Guy. It's like volcano insurance, right? It's a high impact, low probability event, right? It may never happen. But a system that could do that effectively can also focus on a bunch of other events, safety events. Like most of the day-to-day stuff that security teams deal with, in education facilities, which is by far one of the largest areas for us, to enterprises, is things like, car accidents and people down for various reasons, hurting themselves at the gym, having a seizure, having a heart attack, slipping and hitting their head on something, unauthorized access, fights, right, loitering, vandalism, whatever. And being able to not just detect that, but importantly validate it, so quickly that it becomes near real time to say, no, this is not a false positive, like this is real, it's happening, right? But also being able to package that in such a way that it's easily understandable by everybody, from a regular security guy all the way to whoever manages that incident, right? Then being able to integrate our system into every 911 call center in the country, where certain events or events after hours or during certain operations or situations can be escalated not just to the end user, but also to law enforcement, to not lose those precious seconds when they really count, right, in terms of response, because that could be the difference between life and death. That really started driving the conversation more into, look, what previously, took you 3, 4, 5 people to do, now you can do with one, because the system will do 80+% of all of it automatically. So not only do you become a lot more efficient at it, you also become a lot more effective at it, because there is no loss of communication between different people. As I'm sure your father-in-law could tell, anybody who's ever tried to communicate during a time of crisis on radio understands that, everybody's hearing the same thing, but they're understanding all of that completely different. And being able to put a tool where everybody is on the same sheet of music and everybody can do their job simultaneously without blocking on each other, that's a very big deal, especially when seconds matter.
Yeah. Thinking about the ethical use of surveillance, this brings up, kind of, 1984 vibes, right? Like, okay, now we have all these cameras with all these AIs watching us. How do you balance the, the need for effective and instant security and to keep people safe with kind of balancing their considerations for privacy?
Very interesting question that probably we can spend the next month talking about, right? I'm one of those people that believes that privacy, the way we've defined it even 10 years ago, is gone and we're never going to get it back.
Yeah.
The moment you buy one of these, right, that's
Right.
just that is gone.
Yeah. You go on a podcast.
Yeah. Exactly. But it always comes down to, why are you doing this, right? Like, what is it that you're trying to solve? And to us, that's very simple. Like, we want to save lives. If our system saves one life over its entire course, which it already has, arguably, because we had some pretty serious incidents that we were able to capture and get help to, right? That is worth the entire investment, both our time and all the sacrifices that we've made. But also, you have to be smart about it. Like, for example, we focus on people's actions. We don't know who these people are, right? So when an event is caught, I have no idea who this person is. I don't know what their name is. I don't know anything about them. I just know that this is a human, and this human is involved in X, Y, or Z, or whatever the case may be. This human just hopped the fence, right? Or this human just assaulted another human. Or this human...
Or they got a bar and they're trying to crowbar open a door, or they're trying to, open the lock of a car.
Or something as simple as that it's, 2:00 in the morning in an empty office and they slipped and they're laying there, not getting up, not moving, right?
They clutched their chest. Yeah. Now they're keeled over on the floor.
But precisely my point. And of course, like, all this video data, it belongs to the customer. They can do whatever they want with it, whatever their retention rules are. We don't sell it. We don't do anything with it, right? But the fact that we're able to recognize it without knowing who the people are and drive exactly what we said we would, drive response to it in order to help them, right? That, I believe, justifies the fact that we have an AI layer running on customer cameras.
Yeah. And I think another framing of this ethical use of surveillance, it's not really about the privacy. You're out in a public place. You're out in private property, right? I think the right framing is something around personal liberties. Am I infringing on your First Amendment rights or Second Amendment rights or whatever they are provided by what we have agreed to in our social contract in the United States? If you go out and you're committing crimes or harming people, you should get caught and stopped or whatever it is. But if we are turning this into 1984, like, we're going to coerce people into and control them with our surveillance, I think, and make them do things they don't want to do. I think that's a whole different kind of framing.
And we had a bunch of questions and references to Minority Report when we were first starting out. And I
Yeah.
think the big difference between that and us is that we're not getting there telling you, oh, you're about to do something very bad, don't do it, right? Like, we have no idea what you're about to do. But when you're actually doing it, we can absolutely tell if you're breaking a certain rule. Now, whether that rule is important enough for us to detect or not, this is part of the onboarding process. Like, when we go through discovery with potential customers, and you can imagine the vendor security audits that we're doing. We're talking to their IT and security teams, and a lot of the discovery process is, hey, listen, right? You know your facilities better than we do. You know your employees or your students better than we do, right? Like, what things do you care about the most? Like, what is the top problem that you're trying to solve? And if that problem doesn't fit with what we believe are the best at, it's often that we're saying, hey, listen, we're probably not the best system for you. Like, there's other systems that we're more than happy to recommend. But if what they're trying to solve and their approach with how they're trying to solve that fits into what we do best and also what we believe in, again, fundamentally save lives and help people and protect property, then yeah, we raise our hand and say, absolutely, this is right. Like, this is us. We would love to help. So let's work together and see how it goes.
So walk us through how this works. How does it detect threats like weapons or violence in real time? What kind of data machine learning models are powering these? Did you take something off Hugging Face and fine tune it, or did you end up training your own models on a bunch of these threats? How did that work?
So,
How does that work?
so these are our models, obviously. The concrete details of how exactly this is built, you're talking to the wrong guy. You definitely need to get Dimitri on this call, and he would be more than happy to tell you how that works. I'm not even going to try and pretend to understand how to build that because, like I said before, he's the mastermind of all the technical cool stuff that we have happening. But operationally, the way this works is that when we plug into their existing camera infrastructure, so the cameras that they already have, there's two ways that we can do it. We can either go directly to cloud, or if they have limitations, be it security limitations or they have bandwidth limitations, there's an edge device. That edge device is still connected to AWS, right? In such a way that it doesn't raise any red flags during penetration tests or their network security assessments. But essentially, there's two ways to do it. And even some of our customers, they have both, depending on the type of facilities and where those facilities are located and what infrastructure is supporting those facilities. Once that is all plugged in, the system essentially is ready to use. It doesn't take that long for us to onboard a building. Now, it's just a matter of understanding what is their risk profile. And that's early on, it's fairly easy to do. And everybody gets, the basics across the board. Like, everybody gets weapons detection, everybody gets fight detection, everybody gets person down detection, like the basic safety stuff that are applicable across the board to various different customers. And then they have the ability to customize the rules, meaning that, hey, listen, this area might be highly restricted. This area may be semi-public versus public. That's what I care. This is the type of stuff that I care in this area versus that area. And that's one of the reasons why we built our system, unlike others, around essentially 3D modeling and geolocation, is to be able to separate different areas and be able to visually identify the flow of people within that area, right? And how to best apply the detection and tracking rules within a particular area. But also something really cool happens that once you set those rules, and this is my assumption, and I believe that a lot of people on my team agree with me, is that often people may think they know the risk profile very well, but they really don't. They might know it very well for their building or their campus or even possibly their neighborhood that they're in. But the further the buildings and the campuses that they manage, because like a regional security manager or, a deputy officer under their control can have a bunch of different buildings in a bunch of different areas, and sometimes it could be across an entire region, right? The further you get from them, the more those risk profiles that they believe are true become more of an assumption. And because our system continuously monitors for
what is a risk profile, just for the audience? What does that mean?
Uh, The way I define it, or I guess the way that is most commonly defined, is what are the most likely things that are going to happen in your facility, right? That would increase your risk, and that could be, financial risk. It could be safety risk. It could be a security risk. We primarily deal on the security and safety risk, but of course, every one of those events, right, has the potential of affecting either your brand reputation or some sort of payout, right? A problem with employee relations, whatever the case may be. So that's when they say risk profiles, meaning that what kind of bad things could potentially happen in your facility, right? What do you need to know about? What things do you need to respond to? Which things are nice to know? Which things you completely don't worry about because this is just not something that you believe is relevant to your organization and to your people. Does that explain it? How I'm
Yeah.
thinking about it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So you guys have been adopted by, Fortune 500 companies, schools, industrial facilities. Which industry or use case is showing the most potential?
Education. I'll be honest. I mean, it became even a surprise to us because we initially thought that enterprises probably be the main user of this. But the more we started deploying this, and I don't know, because of the current climate, with all the violence in schools and higher education,
Yeah.
but data began to show us that we're being pulled more and more into the education space. And when I say education, I mean K through 12 as well as higher ed, like universities,
Right.
colleges, etc. It's really cool that when we do a pitch, right, and you can always tell that when it clicks or it doesn't, or how quickly it clicks.
Right.
And what we found with enterprises is that sometimes it clicks like that, right, very quickly. And sometimes they understand everything that you're saying, but it doesn't quite click. And there's so many factors. Are they looking to upgrade their system or bring technology into physical security, right? Is this a priority for them? Does their team even believe that there is a problem? Like all of those kind of go into the whether somebody's going to get interested or potentially interested in this or not. What we found with education is that 30 seconds into the conversation, they're like, this is amazing. We absolutely need this. We
Wow.
understand the value, protecting our people and protecting
For students. Yeah.
our students, right? This
It's
is
so
super
important.
important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us more, right? And then the conversations typically go, well, we've heard of this company, we've heard of this company. How are you guys different? Like, what do you bring to the table that would make us think that you are the right solution? And this is where we're going to, like, well, we focus on solving these particular problems, right? Which is real-time response, real-time management, get to the problem as quickly as possible, right? And other companies focus on a couple of other problems. And as long as that conversation continues, and of course they see the demo and they see our approach and how we do things, it becomes a very interesting conversation from essentially 30 seconds into it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I can relate to this as having 3 children and having a couple active shooter situations where, it wasn't an active shooter, but it was a threat, upon the school,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just really scary because you got to go pick up your kids, and it's just like, if you can have some sort of an immune response like Volt that keeps people safer. Because it doesn't appear we're ever going to do gun control in this country, so we're going to need another approach.
And just on that topic, like a few weeks ago, we had a very interesting thing that happened. A parent from a school in Chattanooga, Tennessee, who's on the PTA, he essentially called us. Who calls these days, right? But he called us, and he either left a message or he got in touch with one of our product managers and said, "Hey, listen, I'm such and such. We had an incident, right? Luckily, nothing happened, but there was an incident. The weapon was missed. Right. It was potentially a very bad situation if that weapon was going to get used, right? I did my research. I looked at a bunch of companies. I think your approach is the best. Can you come talk to us?" And I think within like 48 hours, I was on a plane to Chattanooga to speak with them, their principals, a couple of law enforcement professionals, and it was just awesome seeing that conversation go from, because I don't think they even knew that he invited me to come and speak with them, right?
Oh, wow.
So it was like, oh, great, we're going to hear another sales pitch now. And I don't do sales pitches. Like, I just tell you what we do. And as I started talking and saying, hey, I believe these are the problems you guys are dealing with. This is our approach. This is how I think about it, right? You could just see that the amount of questions that started to come in and the type of questions that they started asking, you can see how passionate everybody from the parents, to the principals, to the police captain that was sitting there, right? How interested they were in possible solutions to solve problems like this, to try and minimize the potential of problems like that happening again.
Yeah.
And I don't think you see that level of passion to solve a problem in a lot of industries.
It's a hair on fire problem for them, right? Because they feel powerless, right? Because somebody can come in with an AR-15, a disgruntled student, and just unload on people. And it's like, what do you do? Well, you do these lockdown drills and you lock the classrooms. Let's arm the teachers, which is like a crazy proposition. But hey, why not deploy Volt, detect that these things are happening, put the school in lockdown immediately, and just prevent a bad situation from turning into a tragedy. So it's a hair on fire problem for them. I love hearing that story of product market fit. Do you have any interesting stories of your system detecting or saving potential tragedies like this from happening? I'm sure you have a few.
We definitely have a few, from some more anecdotal to some more serious. The serious one that comes to mind immediately is that we have a customer who was supporting their tech company, right? And the cleaning staff, the janitorial staff, was alone in the building late at night, and they fell. I don't know if they slipped or whatever happened to them, but you can clearly see that they fall and they hit their head on a sharp edge, and they're down on the ground, not moving. Nobody's in that building, right? And even though they have,
it was just one person just slipped and hit their head.
That's it, right? The system recognized it within 4 seconds or so. Within 15 seconds, this was sent to the people that need to respond. Virtually immediately after that, somebody came in, got them help, called an ambulance. And the way that it was told to us after the fact, and it's like, hey, listen, if we had doubters before, it's like, why are we paying for this system? Is it really that necessary? All of that doubt is gone because we were able to help somebody. And she said, thank you. And she's going to come to work happy knowing that she's protected, versus you can imagine all the other potential scenarios that could have unfolded, that none of them are good. That's one. Do you want to hear a couple more anecdotal ones?
Yeah, let's keep going. Yeah. I love these stories. Yeah.
We had an anecdotal one in San Francisco where people's packages, one of our customers, because it's on the first floor, right, and it's a building, it's got a bunch of glass walls. People will see a bunch of packages from Amazon, whatever delivery is being stuck up inside, right? And then they would just kind of look around. There's no police around, and they would force open the door, walk in, and steal packages. And it's an anecdotal thing because it's like, oh, nobody's really getting hurt, but it sucks. It's annoying. People want to get their packages. People are counting on those deliveries. They could not solve it. They hired security guards. Those security guards were never there. They hired security guards to be there. I don't know what they were doing. I don't want to speak for them. Maybe they were on their phone or just didn't think that much of a priority. They had no idea how to solve this simple problem, right? They put us, the first night that the system was operational, it caught the person essentially trying to fidget with the door. That was caught, escalated. Somebody came in. So essentially, in the first night of having Volt, that problem was solved just by very quickly catching a potential problem and sending it to the right people to be able to respond, saying, hey, listen, we've notified you. We know that you saw this. You have to take action on that.
That's amazing. And I think everybody now is kind of familiar with having these Ring doorbell cameras. We have one. So who's coming to your doorstep. And, I think a certain amount of surveillance is actually good, and people appreciate it, right? Because it keeps you safe, and exactly who's coming to your door, who's potentially stealing your packages, or where we live in California, you see all the wild animals right in the middle of the night, like raccoons and bears and deer, and it's pretty fun. You said you had one more story, or
I can give you one more, and that one.
Let's do one more. Yeah.
So you can imagine the biggest nightmare scenario for us is to find a weapon in the school, right? Because that's like, holy crap! Now we're in crisis mode, right?
Yeah. Some student brings a loaded weapon to school.
Exactly. So we never want to see that notification on our system. Well, once it came through. weapon detected in a school. And like we said, we have ways to, filter out the false positives. So
Yeah.
once we realized, again, this is done very quickly within 15
So a
seconds.
human verifies this. You have a human on staff that actually goes, okay, there's a classification with some probability out of the AI model, weapon detected at school, verification within seconds. The human looks at it, yes. And then what do you do?
Correct. Well, it's actually, we have a team, obviously, because of the number of customers that we have.
Yeah.
But exactly, once that was verified, then we realized it is a weapon. Luckily, it wasn't a firearm, it was a knife, right? We went into full crisis mode. That was escalated to the right people. The people on the ground, the teachers, they took action. What made this more difficult, right, is that the kids started moving across the school grounds, right? Which, again, this is one of the differentiators that what our system does, is that we're able to track that automatically across all the cameras in time and space, essentially. That makes it very easy to pinpoint the exact location or the potential location if there's no camera coverage of where the person is, right? Luckily, the response was very swift. It ended up being like a prop for a play that they were doing, so there was nothing bad about it. It's just that information was not that information was not communicated to like the all of the staff. I think like one teacher knew about it or something. So they kind of had to have an internal huddle saying like, guys, like if you're gonna do that, right, you should probably tell somebody, right?
Weapons around the school that look like weapons, yeah,
or at least like toys that look like weapons. You should probably tell somebody. But this is very anecdotal, thank God. But the really cool thing about it was that the system performed flawlessly, right? The team performed flawlessly. The way we've designed all the SOPs and what needs to happen along the way, all of that worked well, and that kind of validated even for us. It's like, God forbid something happens, right? The way we've built it, we are able to provide that information so quickly to the right people to be able to respond as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you guys recently raised a pretty big Series A round. Kind of what was your pitch to investors, and how do you plan to deploy that capital to further your mission?
We raised our Series A last summer. Luckily for us that we've had the same lead for the past few rounds, which was awesome. It means that, we must be doing something right. But the idea behind it is this, that there's a lot of people that try to bring AI and automation to physical security, right? The way we're doing it, in our opinion, is going to allow to significantly reduce the how many people have to deal with it on the customer side, meaning that what previously took 7-10 people now could be done with one, right? It's essentially making physical security a tool that could be used by anyone. It doesn't need to be trained teams. It doesn't need to be certain training courses that somebody has to go to, because all those complications, they really lead to various results when it comes to effectiveness when it's necessary. But if you're able to develop a tool that completely removes that from the equation, doesn't matter who's sitting behind the desk issuing badges, right? Regardless of what happens in your school or in your office, right? System performance is going to be the same each time, so you can start really relying on actually protecting your people and your property. Of course, this was the idea behind the pitch. I assume you don't want me to actually go through the pitch.
No.
But
I'm sure there's lots of people out there who would love to hear the whole pitch, but yeah.
Oh, they can find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, there you go.
But yeah, and once we were able to raise that, our first, let's call it first real round, right? That allowed us to get more engineers, because I'm sure you know this. It's very difficult, to build the ship and sail it at the same time, right? It would be great to be able to do a couple of things in parallel and deploy a couple of customers in parallel and support a couple of customers in parallel. So it allowed us to do that. It also, I think not a lot of early stage founders talk about, how reliable their system is and how many fires they go through on a daily basis where something breaks, and something breaks every single day, right?
Right.
And being able to bring some more people can, stabilize that. And now, wow, the system is actually working and it's actually not breaking. So we can focus on building some, more cool stuff for our customers. But also thinking about, go to market and bring in the right talent there, bring in the right talent into marketing, right? You might have the best system in the world, but if nobody knows about it, right, it's very difficult to get new customers and accelerate that growth. outreaches are great, but there's nothing like inbound, right? When somebody
Oh yeah.
comes to you and says, hey, listen, we've heard about you. We want
Saw
to
you on the
talk.
Ignite podcast.
So, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. I really
hopefully. Yeah.
appreciate that. Hopefully
No,
I
I'll
sent
send
you
this to
something
my
that's interesting.
superintendent. So my wife's very involved here with the school district. So yeah, we'll definitely see if we can get some inroads for you here.
No,
I'd love to have your system at my school for my child's safety, right?
absolutely. Would love to have you.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So how do you think about like kind of the long term of AI, public safety, and especially Volt? As you kind of look forward 5 or 10 years, what's that long term vision for you guys?
I mean, let's be honest. Physical security has been done the same way since ancient Egypt and the Great Wall of China. It's just, doors and people with sticks, right? It is long overdue for technology. And in my opinion, that it's such a huge market that has largely been just ignored by tech. And if you start adding, just two things, if you start thinking about adding AI and robotics into it, right, and removing not removing, but at least decreasing all the human failures that lead to a bunch of the problems that we
Right,
all know
right.
is the fact, that will completely change the industry. It'll make it a lot more effective and like actually accomplish its goals. And that's the bet that we're placing. The bet that we're placing is that don't put technology into first responders' hands for technology's sake. Don't give them a gadget, because the people that actually do this job, they don't want a gadget. Right? People that do this job, they want a tool that will make them more effective. They want a force multiplier. They
Right.
they want to have something that will make them faster, make them better, make them be able to handle more stuff. And even looking at some of our competitors, and they build great stuff. Like I can't say anything bad about them, but
Yeah.
I think because the notion of bringing technology to physical security is still in its infancy, everybody's kind of taking a little bit of a different approach and is placing a bet on what they believe would be the future of this. Like, all right, we're placing a bet on speed, right? We're placing a bet,
Yeah.
and let's give the first responder a tool that will allow them to do their job much, much quicker and much more effectively, to stop problems either before they happen or as soon as they happen. If we go, 5 to 10 years, look at what all of us are trying to solve now. Essentially, all of us are trying to understand, how do you significantly reduce the amount of people that are watching cameras, right? How do you deploy all this AI across all the other cameras to go from, 30 people looking at cameras to like one person looking at cameras?
Right. Yeah.
But
Or
then
just looking at the alerts.
or looking at the alerts and just
Yeah.
responding, right?
Here's the 5-second video clip that you need to watch based on what we detected. Yeah.
But then look at the same problem along the lines of patrolling different areas or just presence, right? They run into the same problem. You will never have enough budget to hire all the people, meaning that those roving guards or whoever has the presence, you kind of have to try and anticipate where you want them between what times to try and maximize the potential of them being in the right place at the right time. And again, it goes into the same problem. Humans can't work 24/7, so you need multiple shifts, right? Humans vary significantly in their training and motivation between shift to shift. And I think the natural progression in the next 5 to 10 years, especially when the costs go down to that and technology catches up, will be, I don't know if it'll be drones or robotic dogs or whatever the case may be, or, flying cameras, whatever that automation is. But I do believe that it's heading that way. I think if you are able to automate response to a point where, if something happens, you get the same level of reliability in terms of time and the quality of response that you're getting, without all the expenses and challenges with the human factors. I think that's going to be very interesting to see, and there's huge growth potential there.
Very exciting future. So why don't we wrap up with a rapid fire round?
Let's do it.
Okay. What's, besides what you guys are working on, what's kind of the most exciting AI development you're seeing right now?
Well, I would say large language models, because even
Naturally. Yeah.
I know, sorry, I can't give you a more exciting thing, but because I'm thinking about Volt all the time, right? Imagine everything that it just explained to you, right?
Right.
Typically, it would take somebody, hours, if not days, if not weeks, to try and set up that system. Imagine that you don't have to do that. Imagine you just kind of like Google search it or whatever it says and say, hey, I want you to do this, right? And the system
Right. Yeah.
preconfigures everything.
Yeah.
That has never been possible before. And it is still,
Yeah. You're describing like an agentic workflow that can spin up basically software for you and connections and API layers to build stuff for you.
Yeah, that means that a lot of these like security academies and all that stuff that take months to train somebody to a mediocre level of knowing how to deal with this with a complex system, you no longer need that. An entire system for an enterprise could be configured, in a matter of a few minutes, just by telling it what you want it to do.
Yeah, that's amazing. What's your best productivity hack you're using every day?
Try to fail as much as I can.
I love that. What's one book that greatly influenced your career?
How to Make Friends and Influence People.
I love that one. That's a good one. What's your favorite city you've worked in?
Queenstown, New Zealand.
Oh, wow. Was that for Google or?
That was for Google, yes.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, it's been on our list for a while as a family to go there. We just haven't made it. We had the whole trip booked right when COVID started. 3 weeks. We're going to go do North and South Island, the whole deal. Camper van, the whole deal, and then COVID, and we had to cancel it. And that would have been a great trip. What's your go-to strategy for handling high pressure situations? Seems like you've dealt with some.
Go-to strategy for handling high pressure situations. I honestly think that I just try to do what I am most terrified of doing. Like whatever that biggest fear is, and typically in high pressure situations, you have a fear, right? Be it lose a customer or whatever the case may be. Speak to that potential customer that I have to address 200 people that have been in the industry for 30 years. I don't know what I'm doing. Are they going to take me seriously? And I think you just do it. I think you don't think about the consequences. I think you don't think about how you're going to sound, how you're going to look. You don't think about, do I have the perfect solution for it? Do I even know the answer for it? So every day I essentially try to ask myself, what is the biggest fear that I have? And I purposely go and do it. And if I make a fool out of myself, then be it. But at least I know that one thing that I'm most worried about, I'm going to do it regardless and no matter what it is. And you know what? Do what you have to do and deal with the consequences later.
Love that. Dovetailing nicely into the next question. What's a key quality you look for when hiring for Volt?
How uncomfortable can you be and continue moving forward? Because I think there's a lot to say when you hire somebody, like if they have the problem solving mentality. Listen, you can have a bunch of PhDs and you can have a lot of years doing what you're doing, and you can still not quite get there. It's like one of those sayings that it's typically not the strongest fighter or not the fastest fighter, not the talented fighter that wins. It's the one that doesn't give up, right? And if you have somebody who will stay in the fight as long as possible and will try to solve that problem and will not give up no matter what, right? Most of the things could be taught. Most of the things are reversible, most of the mistakes anyway, right?
Yeah.
But with that mentality, you at least know that the person will keep going and keep going and keep going and keep looking for solution. And eventually, something will happen. Personally, I think that is the biggest thing that in the interviews that I try to understand if they have that in them.
Yeah, especially for a startup, right? When you're kind of seed, Series A, Series B, there's a lot of ambiguity and you have to be comfortable with moving forward. Like, what's the behavioral interview question or what is the technique that you use to assess this with a candidate? Because I'm curious.
Depending on the candidate, depending how open they are, depending on what they're talking about. But for example, a very nice way to start with that is ask them about their biggest failure, right? And if you don't feel like they're being sincere because they're trying to essentially find a way to answer this question, and tell them, listen, legitimately, what is the biggest failure? Were you trying to get into Stanford and you didn't, right? Did you try to work for Google or Apple or Facebook and you didn't? Did you go after, the girl of your dreams and that didn't happen and you didn't, right? And you didn't date anybody? Tell me. And once they do, you kind of want to understand what happened next. And what I find is that the really determined people, they figured out a way, right? They figured out a way, or they're well on their journey of figuring out. And sometimes it takes years, right? Hey, listen, I wanted to do this, but I couldn't. So you know what I did? I started digging into this area, right? Like I
Yeah.
learned some
Yeah.
contacts, and then I get connected to the right people. So I'm not quite there yet, but look at all the things that I've done. I didn't just sit there and accept failure. I'm
Right.
still moving towards that goal, and I know I'm going to get there one way or another. It's just a matter of time.
I love that. What's the best piece of advice for that you have for young entrepreneurs or new entrepreneurs? Doesn't have to be young.
New entrepreneurs, whatever you want to
Yeah.
do, do it now. There's never going to be a perfect answer. And by the way, this is not
Or perfect
my
time. Yeah.
perfect time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the perfect answer. You might not have the perfect solution, right?
Right.
Just begin. And this is not mine. I stole that from a number of people. I've been lucky enough to have friends and advisors like Mike Cassidy, like Adrian Owen, like a couple of other folks, right? That when I just started thinking about the possibility of me starting a company, because they're serial successful entrepreneurs, all of them, and investors, I would ask him, "What do you think?" And they would always answer and give me an advice, but they would also say, "Just do it, man. Just begin." Right? Like
Yeah.
don't wait for the perfect time. It's not going to happen. Don't wait for the perfect idea. It's not going to happen. Just begin. And I wish I would have listened to them 5 years earlier, right? Because that would
Mm.
have gave me 5 more years, and like I would have been 5 years ahead of what I am now. And
Yeah.
if somebody's thinking about doing, or they quit and they decide, okay, cool, like I'm starting this, just begin. Just begin talking
Yeah.
to people that have done it before. Begin doing something. Begin building prototypes. Begin talking to potential customers. Begin talking to potential investors. And it doesn't matter how many no's you hear and if people are going to laugh you out of the room. It's going to happen anyway.
I love that. It's the Nike advice. Just do it.
Yeah.
Or just begin it,
Just begin it.
Well, where can listeners and potential customers find out more about you and Volt AI?
Best way to do it is vault.ai, obviously. Very simple. It's our website. And connecting with me, LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, shoot me a note. We can always chat, and it doesn't need to be about Vault or anything else. If there's anything that I could be helpful with, or anybody from our team, would be more than happy.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. Really enjoy the conversation.
Well, thank you for having me.